welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really significant document, the Eritrean Political Forces Declaration for National Unity and Defense of Sovereignty.
That's right. It came out in September 2025.
And you provided this set of sources. It's more than just a political statement, isn't it? It reads almost like a roadmap.
It really does. It's this unified blueprint for, well, national security and internal reform put forward by a very wide range of Eritrean political groups.
Groups from inside Eritrea and the diaspora, all affiliations.
Pretty much everyone, yes, from across the spectrum. Their core mission here seems pretty clear. Defend the nation's independence, its territory, its sovereign rights, mainly against these recent claims coming from Ethiopia.
Okay, and what really struck me reading through it is the philosophy behind it. It doesn't take the usual strongman approach to national defense.
No, it doesn't.
It actually says sovereignty is, and I'm quoting here, best defended through the unity and will of the people. That feels quite different.
It absolutely flips the script. It suggests that you can't really defend the country effectively through, secret government deals or just military might alone.
It implies that defense requires internal buy-in, legitimacy.
Exactly. It connects national security directly to things like transparency, accountability, popular support. So yeah, it's as much about governance as it is about geopolitics.
That dual focus is really interesting. So for this deep dive, let's use the declaration's own structure. It makes specific demands on 4 key groups, right?
It does. Ethiopia, the Eritrean government itself, the Eritrean people, and then the wider international community.
Okay, let's start where the declaration seems to start. The external threat. What was the spark? What specifically pushed these diverse groups to issue this unified statement now?
Well, the immediate trigger, according to the document, is a sharp condemnation of recent statements and, frankly, claims coming from the Ethiopian government.
Claims about Eritrean territory, maritime access.
Yes, exactly. The declaration sees this rhetoric as a direct challenge to Eritrea's existence as an independent nation. It's seen as quite alarming.
Was there one specific claim that really pushed things over the edge? The catalyst?
It seems so. The document explicitly condemns the threat to occupy the port of Assab by force. That specific threat, mentioned alongside other, maybe broader historical claims, appears to have been the galvanizing moment.
A threat of outright military occupation.
Yes. The political forces clearly interpret this as an attempt to change Eritrea's borders unilaterally, using coercion or the threat of force.
Now, what's interesting is how they frame their response. It's not just anger. It's rooted in law.
Very much so.
They argue these Ethiopian claims are illegal. Why? What's the legal basis they cite?
Okay, so they point to several things. First, just general violations of international law. Second, the outcome of the 1993 UN-supervised referendum, which, confirmed Eritrea's independence.
Right, the referendum is key.
And third, and this is crucial, they invoke the principle of uti possidetis juris.
Okay, unpack that for us. Uti possidetis juris. Sounds important.
It is, especially in the African context. It's a fundamental legal principle upheld by the African Union that essentially says the borders states inherited at independence, usually the old colonial boundaries, must be respected. They're considered inviolable.
So it's basically saying you stick with the borders you got when you became independent.
Precisely. It's meant to prevent exactly this kind of instability, where historical claims or geographical convenience are used to challenge established borders. It provides the core legal foundation for Eritrea's position here.
That makes sense as a legal argument, but, if a powerful neighbor is making threats of force, how much practical weight does a principle like that carry on its own?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The legal basis is there, and it's strong. That's why they highlight it. It frames the international discussion around existing recognized borders and law. It rejects undermining sovereignty based on, as the text says, the guise of history, proximity, or political convenience.
So it sets the terms of debate, even if enforcement is another issue.
Exactly. But whether it stops unilateral action depends heavily on international will and enforcement, which the declaration addresses later. For now, the core assertion is, legally, Eritrea's sovereignty isn't up for grabs.
Okay, a clear legal line in the sand. So moving from condemnation to action, what specific concrete demands does this declaration make on the Ethiopian government?
Right. It lays out several steps needed for de-escalation. The first set of demands is pretty direct: cessation and respect. Meaning Ethiopia must stop all claims to Eritrean territory or maritime access that involve force or occupation. They specifically mention Assad again.
And stop the hostile rhetoric, too.
Yes, end all hostile actions and rhetoric, and critically fully respect that 1993 referendum outcome. Reinforce that Eritrea's sovereignty is, well, not for sale, not negotiable, not up for compromise.
Okay, cease the threats, respect the independence, but that doesn't resolve the underlying border issue itself, does it? The physical line on the map.
No, and the declaration tackles that head-on. That brings us to the second set of demands, which addresses the root cause of the conflict.
Which is?
Ethiopia must urgently and unconditionally complete the final and binding border demarcation.
And they specify how.
Yes, very clearly. It must be done according to the decision made by the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission, the EEBC.
Right, the EEBC. Remind us why that specific commission's ruling is so central here.
Because the EEBC decision is the internationally recognized, legally binding resolution to the border dispute. It was set up after the last major war as part of the Algiers Agreement.
So the ruling already exists. It's just not been physically marked on the ground.
Exactly. The legal ruling is final and binding. The demarcation is the physical implementation of that judgment. The goal here for the declaration's authors is to settle this permanently. Remove the ambiguity that keeps fueling conflict.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the port issue? Assab, they reject force, but is there any room for cooperation?
Yes, there is. The declaration is quite clear on this, actually. It states the Eritrean people are willing to let Ethiopia use Eritrean seaports.
But with conditions.
Big conditions. Only through peaceful dialogue, mutual agreement, and crucially, in full respect of Eritrea's sovereignty. Sovereignty comes first. No access can even be discussed while threats are on the table.
So, a very firm stance towards Ethiopia. But then the declaration turns inward, towards the Eritrean government itself.
Yes, and this part is just as critical.
It warns the government, reminds them, really, that sovereignty is defended by the people's will, not through, and again I'm quoting, secretive deals, mixed signals, or unilateral military gambits.
This is where that internal accountability piece really comes into focus. The first set of demands on their own government is all about transparency and consistency. Things they argue have been missing.
Like what specifically?
The government must publicly reaffirm Eritrea's full independence without any ambiguity, and reject any foreign claim, full stop.
And be careful about its alliances or political moves.
Exactly. It must stop any political gestures or alignments that could even appear to endorse or enable Ethiopia's ambitions.
And also avoid stirring things up itself.
Yes, refrain from launching provocative armed actions disguised as preemptive measures. But maybe the most pointed demand here is about consistency on the border issue itself.
How so?
They're saying the government can't keep sending contradictory messages, it can't downplay the importance of the EEBC demarcation 1 minute, and then use the unresolved border as justification for endless military readiness or internal repression the next.
So pick a lane, basically. Be clear, be consistent.
Yes, the position has to be transparent and aligned with this unified national stance.
That's a bold move, demanding this kind of accountability from the current government, especially when facing an external threat. Do they acknowledge the risk? That they might be accused of weakening the nation from within at a critical moment.
They definitely anticipate that criticism. And they counter it directly. Their argument seems to be that the lack of accountable governance is the real source of instability and weakness.
Which leads to the next demand.
Precisely. Demand set 2 for the Eritrean government. Cease the repression of political rights inside Eritrea. This is the crucial link they make between internal freedom and external defense.
So they explicitly warn against using the external threat as an excuse for cracking down internally.
Unambiguously, the declaration states, defending Eritrea's borders must not be used as a pretext to silence calls for democratic change.
Wow.
They're arguing that you can't effectively mobilize a nation for defense if its people are repressed, disenfranchised, and fearful of their own government. True national strength, in their view, requires internal justice.
So they are tying national security directly to human rights and democracy.
Yes, affirming that justice, freedom, and accountable governance must match sovereignty. They're essentially defining internal legitimacy not just as desirable, but as a core component of national survival strategy.
Okay, so demands on Ethiopia, demands on the Eritrean government.
Oh.
What about the Eritrean people themselves? What role does the declaration envision for them, both inside the country and in the diaspora?
It's fundamentally a call to mobilize, but a specific kind of mobilization.
Reading.
The main message is, stand united to defend independence. Put aside political differences for this common cause. Reject internal divisions that could play into the hands of external threats.
And critically, who or what are they defending?
This is important. The declaration stresses this campaign is not for the defense of the current government or any single party or leader. It's solely for the defense of Eritrea's sovereignty and territorial integrity itself.
Okay, so unity for the nation, not the regime. How are people asked to mobilize? What actions?
Through civic action, using media, engaging in diplomacy, peaceful mobilization, making their unified voice heard globally.
And what about the push for internal change? How does that fit in?
It's central. The ultimate goal for internal change is stated very clearly. Genuine change can only be achieved through the abolition of dictatorial rule and the establishment of a constitutional democratic system.
So they see democracy not just as a right, but as the only reliable long-term guarantor of independence.
That seems to be the core argument, yes.
All right, so after addressing the regional players and the Eritrean people, the declaration then looks outward to the global stage. Who are they appealing to?
They make a direct appeal to the international community, the UN, the African Union, individual nations described as peace-loving.
And what do they want the world to do?
Essentially, act as the guarantor of international law and the existing agreements. First, they ask the world to uphold international law and the sanctity of recognized borders.
Which means condemning the threats.
Yes. To immediately condemn any attempt to alter Eritrea's territorial status by force or coercion, which clearly includes the threat against Assad. They want formal censure.
Okay, uphold the law. What else?
Second, get to the root of the problem, the border. The international community must support and guarantee the immediate implementation of the final and binding border demarcation, that EEBC decision again.
Support and guarantee the implementation. That sounds like more than just verbal support.
It is. This is a critical ask. They're not just asking the world to acknowledge the ruling exists. They're asking for active involvement, pressure, perhaps even mechanisms to enforce the physical demarcation to finally resolve it.
That's a huge ask, though, given, geopolitics and competing interest. How realistic is it that the UN or the AU would actually step in and guarantee a border demarcation that Ethiopia currently seems unwilling to complete?
It's definitely a significant challenge, no doubt, and maybe immediate enforcement is unlikely. But making the demands so loudly serves a purpose.
Which is?
It puts the issue squarely on the international agenda. It constantly reminds the world that a legal solution already exists and that implementing it is essential to prevent more conflict. It reinforces Eritrea's legal standing internationally.
Okay, so even if enforcement is tough, the demand itself has political value.
Precisely. And finally, they ask the world to recognize and support Eritrea's own conditionality regarding the ports.
Remind us.
That any use of Eritrean ports by Ethiopia must happen only through peaceful dialogue and with full respect for Eritrea's sovereignty. They want the world to back that stance.
Got it. So it's a unified message to the world. We want peace, we're open to cooperation, but sovereignty is paramount and non-negotiable, especially under threat.
That sums it up well.
So when you step back and look at this Declaration for National Unity and Defense of Sovereignty, it really is quite something. That dual focus is striking.
It is. Unified resistance to the external threat, grounded firmly in legal principles like Uti Possidetis Juris and the EEBC ruling.
Combined with this equally strong demand for internal change, for accountable governance, for democratic reform.
Yeah, it fundamentally reframes national security, doesn't it? It makes the case that the ability to defend the nation from outside threats is directly tied to internal justice and political legitimacy.
A really powerful linkage they're making between independence and democracy.
It really is. And it leaves us with a pretty compelling question to think about. Maybe something for you to explore next time. Well, in situations like this, where national sovereignty is under direct threat, and maybe external dangers are used to justify internal control, how often does this happen? How often does the demand for democracy itself become framed as the ultimate necessary component of national defense? What could you explore next based on that connection?
That is a fascinating thought to end on, something for all of us to consider. Thank you for walking us through this declaration today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.